We're going to have a short video to transition into the sermon that my wife is going to be giving, Pastor Donia. So please sit back and enjoy the video on Father's Day.
Ever notice in the moment your balloon came back? Or why you like to work with your hands? Or why your friends always came and played at your house? Ever wonder how vacations are made? Why the night monsters never came back? Or why you and the princess always had the same name? Ever appreciate how happy your dad could be when he walked into the house? How goofiness can ease the tension? Or the non-stop battle he fights between supporting his family and supporting his family. Because this Father's Day, if you really look around, you just might. You might appreciate where some of your passions came from. Might wonder on the dreams of those before. And might notice that being the bad guy is sometimes a very hard job. You may even discover the ultimate pride in his eyes when you've learned for yourself.
Hope you enjoyed that. Happy Father's Day, everybody. Oh, okay, all right. I have to take a few minutes. But so last week we finished, 2 weeks ago we finished up our sermon series on our building and what makes our faith unique. And we have one more point to our vision statement, which we are going to start after the family camp. So second week of July, we'll be going into our final sermon series based on our vision statement. So this Sunday, I'm going to be talking about Father's Day, and we won't have church next Sunday. We'll have church on the 30th. Pastor Mike will give the message. And then the next Sunday, July 7th, many of us will be at family camp, and we're going to have service at family camp, and we're not going to have service here again. So I apologize, 2 Sundays in a span of a month that we're not going to be here. But like Mike said, there's lots of great options. So today I'm going to be talking about a father's love. And I'm just going to start off by talking a little bit about the workshop. Mike shared some great pictures from this overnight sleepover and workshop that our Sunday school kids had. And we had the pleasure and honor of being part of it a little bit. But what was really awesome about this workshop, there were moms who came and helped for many different parts of it, but it was really run by dads. David Stein, David Happel, Christian, and Youngill, and Mike. These were the people who really took care of our kids this last weekend, and it was so awesome to see people being really invested into their children, everybody's children. I wanted to share just a really quick video of the Gladiator games, just for your enjoyment and appreciation. It's a time lapse, so it's a little bit I had a lot of fun with that. But something that my mom just mentioned to me before I started services is that fathers are really under attack in a lot of ways, culturally and socially. And I think that that's something that many of families in America are missing, is a father to be present in their life. And that if there could be a father present in each child's life, what a difference that would make for the whole country and for the whole world. So we really have to give our commendation and recognition to our fathers. I know that sometimes we can point out the flaws. I could say things that share struggles that I had with my dad, or wives, we have our complaints about our husbands sometimes, but we have to really recognize them for the job they do. So I have one quote I want to share to start off with. The righteous man walks in his integrity, and his children are blessed after him. Righteous man walks in his integrity. So let's commend the fathers who are in our children's lives. Let's give one more round of applause for all the dads. A father's love is a unique love. Father's love is different from a mother's love. They're different. They're just as important. I hope you don't mind my sharing. Last night when I picked up my mom from the airport. My mom is visiting. And I didn't have a whole lot prepared for my message yet, so I was like, can you help me? and she said, well, I realized that when you were growing up, and I didn't always appreciate the way that Daddy parented you. Sometimes I wanted him to be more like a mother because that's the way that I parented, and that's the way that she should have parented. But maybe it was hard for her to see the value of the way that my dad parented sometimes. So they're different. So my dad, he's a very special person. I wish he had come along so I could talk about this for him. But he doesn't like to leave the farm. He really likes his gardening and his fishing, and he doesn't like to leave it because things might go awry. But we grew up, many of you know, I grew up in the countryside in rural Missouri, and my dad wasn't the type of dad who would go out of his way to do things just with the kids. Daddy-daughter date, I'd never heard of that until I was at least 30. Movies, I can think of maybe 2, maybe 3 times we went to a movie theater all together. Occasionally we'd go on a float trip down the river. That was something I always looked forward to, and it was a big deal to go on. And we would do a yearly vacation to visit my mom's relatives, and that was like a chore for my dad. The driving and the socializing and the not having his garden. So in one way, I could take that and say, oh, my dad, he didn't care about me. Or maybe you have some beef with your dad. Oh, my dad didn't do this, my dad didn't do that. But one thing that I've come to appreciate and really recognize about my dad was that he always involved us in what he was doing in his life. So gardening, I am a very good gardener. Spent many, many, many hours hoeing and raking and planting and weeding and harvesting. Landscaping projects, when we first moved to our property, it was very raw. A lot of it was just actual woods. But my dad has turned it into a beautiful, beautiful, it looks like a park. And so that doesn't just happen by mowing the lawn. He taught me how to use a pickaxe. I felt like a miner with a giant pickaxe and how to use the pickaxe to get these huge rocks out of the ground so that the lawnmower could go over it evenly, you know. That was what he was doing, and so that's what he involved us in. Our house is heated by a wood-burning furnace, so that means we need firewood. So my dad would chop down the trees, and we would all be a part of stacking the wood and carting it to the basement and stacking it there, storing it. And he was always bringing some interesting wildlife into the house. If he was cutting down a tree and he found a giant Luna moth, he would come into the house with a big, giant green Luna moth to show the kids. If he was pickaxing rocks out of the ground, he might find a salamander, so he'd bring in the big orange salamander into the house. He brought in snakes and rattlesnakes and things like that into the house. We actually had a pet rattlesnake for a while in a cage. Fire ants, whatever it was that he was doing, he was involving us in his life. So I realized that one of my defining characteristics, if somebody says, well, what do you like? Then I'm like, I like to be outside. I like to garden. I like to be in nature. That's really where I feel home. And I tend to just think, oh, that's me. That's what I like. But I realize that wouldn't be me, or I wouldn't like those things as much if it wasn't for the experiences that I had with my dad. So on the other side of the nice things, the lovey things, in that video I just showed you, most of it was very sweet about how the princess always had the same name as you, and the night monsters never came back. But there's the other side of a father's love, which is a tough love. And I want to share some about that today, because that's what really is a unique aspect of a father's love. When I was often working outside in Missouri, do you know how humid it is in Missouri? It feels like 120% humidity, and it's 90 degrees outside. And whenever I was doing whatever I was doing with my dad, whether it was building something or pickaxing the rocks out of the ground, my life would have been very different if I'd had brothers, probably. But since my dad didn't have any sons, I had to take that place. So whenever I was, working hard, and I'd start to complain, like, "Oh, Dad, can we take? It's so hot. I'm sweating everywhere." My dad, this is his signature quote: "Sweat is good for you. It gets the toxins out. It means you're doing something if you're sweating. Sweat is good for you." And that was the only response. It wasn't like, "Sweat is good for you. Okay, let's go get a drink." It was, keep going. I also remember another thing that he said a number of times, which always surprised me a little bit. Sometimes I would go up to my dad and be like, "Dad, I kicked the ball so high, I almost kicked it over the house." And you know what my dad would say? "Almost doesn't count." My mom knows, "Dad, I almost won the badminton championship at school. The only team that beat me was the boys' team." Almost? Almost doesn't count. If you run 500, 275 feet, you didn't run a mile. You can't say you run a mile unless you ran 5,280 feet. So it was hard to hear when I felt really proud of something that I'd done. But it did, and it's different from how I often do things with my kids. If my kids show me something they're proud of, even if I'm not super excited about it, I try to be really thrilled about it. Because from my side, I want them to feel how wonderful they are and how much value they have to me and how proud I am of them. But sometimes it's good to hear that you can actually do a little bit better. sometimes it's good to hear that you still have room to grow and to have a little nudge along the way. So my dad was always encouraging me to do something all the way, not most of the way and do a mostly good job. Do it all the way and do a really good job. So we really need both motherly and fatherly love. So one thing that's unique about our faith is we refer to God as our heavenly parent. And most Christianity will refer to God as Heavenly Father. But we recognize that God has both sides. God made humanity, he says, in his image, male and female, he created them. So in that, we recognize that God has both a masculine and a feminine nature. And that God's love is expressed to us in both a motherly and a fatherly way. God does have compassion and incredible grace and infinite love. But sometimes part of that love is to not be okay with us just being stuck where we're at. God doesn't want us to just be comfortable in our one little spot for the rest of our life. I can imagine that God is like, don't you even know the blessings that are ahead of you? Can't you see what I've prepared for you? But you're not ready to receive it unless you move forward, unless you grow, unless you take some action. So sometimes God has to also give a kind of fatherly or tough love to us. Sometimes we're put into situations in our life. Maybe you can think of some things in your life where you didn't feel comfortable. Or you say, why me? Why does this happen to me? Or sometimes we feel really sad about someone that's passed out of our life, or the way that a certain situation went with one of our children. We can't have control over every aspect of our life. But we can't always just be content and happy with where we're at either. So I have this is a quote from Proverbs, chapter 3, verse 11 through 12. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, and do not resent his rebuke, because the Lord disciplines those he loves. As a father, the son he delights in. The Lord disciplines those he loves. And discipline, I think this is a word that can be taken in different ways. And sometimes people think discipline is punishment, or discipline is a spanking, or discipline is being grounded. But discipline is giving guidelines and encouraging people to move forward and grow. So, Lord disciplines those he loves. As a father, the son he delights in. Now, I think that it's interesting. I was looking on Facebook recently, and I found this thread of teachers who were complaining, and a phrase that goes around these days is like, kids have changed. They're not respectful like they used to be, or it can be hard in the classroom. But teachers are saying, kids aren't changing. Kids are kids. Everybody comes into the world with the same things. Everybody's born the same way. It's the environment that they're growing up in that's changing, and then changing their reactions. And a lot of that is that if parents, this is connected, okay? If parents don't really care about their kids, there might be punishment, but there's not real discipline. There's not really a teaching of a way that we should go. and an encouragement along the right path. So if we really love our children, we do discipline them. And that's exemplified here. The Lord disciplines those he loves as a father, the son he delights in. So God is also, along with being, sometimes you need a mother's love from God. Sometimes you just feel completely broken. And all you need is love, and all you need is grace. And you need to feel God's loving embrace. But God is also a firm and loving God, always guiding us forward and out of our comfort zone into what we feel are difficult and even impossible situations. Anybody feel like they might be in a difficult situation this week? No? Okay, at least Mike and I are on the same page. Think of it this way. How many of you have taught a child how to ride a bike? Okay, how many of you have, as a child, learned how to ride a bike? Okay, there we go. A father teaching his child how to ride a bike knows that the child is capable of riding the bike, right? The parent knows how to pedal. They know that there's a balance that needs to be found, but they know their kids can do it, and once they find it, then they'll be so free and happy that they can ride their bike. And so they continually encourage their kids, even when they fall over, even when they scrape their knees, even when they fall down and cry. But do you remember what it feels like from the child's perspective? I don't know if any of you just got on your little tricycle, your little bike without the training wheels, and just took off like it was easy. I know my kids, actually one of my kids kind of did, but generally you get on this thing and you just feel like you're going to fall over any second. It's scary because you're shaking and your feet aren't on the ground. You're totally you don't feel like you're in control of what's happening and you could get hurt. And so you resist it. Right? You don't want to pedal fast because if you pedal fast, you could get hurt even worse. But what is required to gain the momentum and the balance in riding a bike? You have to pedal at least a little bit fast, right? I think that's a kind of imagery I have when God puts us in difficult situations. From my perspective, I don't want to be here. I might get hurt. I might get rejected by somebody. But I believe that God is like, you can do it. Just push a little bit harder and you'll find it. You'll find the balance. You'll find the blessings. You'll find the next level that I have for you. Sometimes tough love is no for an answer. In the Bible it says, knock and it will be opened to you. Ask and you will receive, right? But there's a condition with that. It also says when it's aligned with God's purpose, right? Sometimes the answer to our prayers is no. And that's a hard thing to have happen. When you pray for something, and it doesn't show up in your life. I think that's those moments where you can be like, am I actually praying to anybody up there? Right? But, moms are also capable of tough love. I have a story about my mom. So I remember once I had a play date with one of my friends, and I didn't get play dates very often because they all live so far away. And we had to finish the play date, but her friend invited me to stay over for the night, and I was like, yes, Mom, please, can I spend the night? And she said no. And I didn't understand why, because I had spent the night before, so I didn't see any reason why I shouldn't be able to spend the night again. And so I started whining. I started begging. I started reasoning with why I should be able to spend the night. I argued, and she still said no. I think I got into the car and I was so upset. I probably cried all the way home, and I felt unjustly treated. Anybody feel like that you've been dealt a bad hand in life, or you got the short end of the stick, or things just aren't the way they are for you that they are for other people? That's how I felt in that moment. And I just couldn't understand my parents' perspective. Later on, I realized that there really was a good reason why she didn't want me to spend the night at my parents' house, because of something she learned about her dad. But I couldn't understand it at that time. So I think the message behind this is that wherever we're at, there is a way to be grateful, even in a difficult situation. We can be grateful for our parents' love, our heavenly parents' love, in all the ways that is expressed. One of my mentors, when I was on my missions program, said, it's one thing to be grateful when you're in a good situation, when things are going your way, there's rainbows and butterflies. It's easy to be grateful, right? But it's not always easy to be grateful when you're in a difficult situation. And there's even a distinction here. If you put yourself in a difficult situation, for example, Byron just finished a 100-mile race. That was a difficult situation. I heard it was 37 degrees that night, and it was rainy and stormy. But he chose that. He knew that was a possibility. And so in that kind of a difficult situation, we can also find a way to be positive, because, I chose that. I wanted that. I can be grateful when I make it through because I'm accomplished in what I did. So there's being grateful in a difficult situation that you chose. But to be grateful in a difficult situation that you didn't choose, I think that's the hardest. But my mentor told me, from God's perspective, as a parent looking at his children, I know that if my child was in a very difficult situation, maybe they had a health issue that just came up out of nowhere, or maybe they're having a really hard time at school because there was bullies, I would want to go in, if I could, and take away the illness or get rid of the bullies. Parents can't always do that. And I could understand if my child was upset. But what if that child were to come to me and said, "It's okay, Mom. I'll be all right. I have so many things to be grateful for that this doesn't bother me." What would you feel as a parent? Wouldn't you just be melted? Just be melted by the heart of your child. So my mentor said, it's hard to be grateful in a difficult situation you didn't choose. But what kind of joy can you bring to God when you trust him, even in those difficult situations, and you're grateful to God for the good things that you do have in your life, and say, it's okay, I'll make it through. I think that fathers have to deal with that the most, I think. And there are some mothers who take more of the tough love side, and some fathers who are more, embracing and soft. But I think many times the dads are the ones who have to do that. They have to be in that, like in the video, I said, being the bad guy is the hardest job. Sometimes our fathers have to take that role. Lay down the law. And it's not usually not immediate that the kids can recognize where the love is behind that. But what kind of joy can we bring to our fathers when we are grateful to them and we say, I know there's a reason, and I know it'll be okay. Here's a quote from Reverend Moon, our founder. Please understand me. I love you, but I cannot be soft with you. Under the circumstances, that would not be the expression of love. There are times, there are circumstances where being soft and loving and embracing is the expression of love. But there are certain circumstances where we need a firm guiding hand. And I was reading, he shared a little story about how we should become like steel. And how is steel made? Steel is one of the toughest metals, right? But it's made out of iron. And iron is a very malleable, kind of soft metal. And in order for iron to turn into steel that can withstand heat and that can withstand being beaten and that can withstand our stovetops, it has to go through a process. And the process of turning iron into steel requires heat, a lot of heat, over 1,000 degrees heat, and it requires being beaten. If you're making you used to watch this old Korean drama called Jumong, and they had discovered how to make steel weapons. And so, and you had to beat the swords on the smithy thing. I'm sorry, I don't know the terms. Or another example is turning coal into diamonds, right? It requires incredible pressure. So there's this song that goes, when the pressure is on, he's making diamonds. And it refers to God in our life. Sometimes we feel like we're under pressure. Sometimes we feel like we might break or we can't understand why we're in the situation we're in. But even through that, God has a goal, right? God's not just trying to give us a hard time. God wants to turn us into something more beautiful, into a bigger person that can overcome more adversity. So, I think that's my quotes. Okay. So I hope that for each of you, I understand that everyone has a different experience with their fathers. Some people didn't even have an experience with their fathers. For some of you, you might be daddy's girl, and you have lots of wonderful memories with your fathers. Some of you might not have those memories. But even if you've had difficult times, I hope that you can find something that you can relate with in that video. Maybe one or two aspects where you can recognize, oh, there was love there. That was my dad loving me. Or, wow, something that I have now, I can only say I have that because of the love of my father. I wouldn't have that. And if you don't have a father in your life, then please look to our Heavenly Father and see how God is guiding you. I'm sure that for the people who don't have present fathers in their life, God is He's right there. Because God knows you need it. We all need a father figure. That's my message for today. Happy Father's Day. We love all you dads, all you future dads. You're on your way. And please join me in prayer. Most beloved Heavenly Parent, Heavenly Father, Good morning. Thank you so much for another beautiful morning. Thank you so much for all the love and the preparation you invested to create a beautiful world for us to live in, an air to breathe, and people in our lives for us to have relationships with. God, we know you intended for all of our relationships to be relationships of love and of trust and where we find our deepest joy and happiness. God, unfortunately, for many of us, that's not our overwhelming experience. Maybe even with our own parents, it's hard for us to find the love. But God, I pray that we can have compassion on our parents and know that everyone does the very best they have with what they do, the best they can with what they have. And if we didn't feel like we got the best, then we can have compassion that they didn't have what they needed. But God, I know that in many ways we can still find incredible love that you have shown to us through our life and that our parents have shown to us in any way that they were able to. God, I pray you can please be with all the fathers here today. It's not an easy job. And I pray that you can guide them as they guide our families and guide our children. And for all the future fathers here, I pray that they can each find your love, learn from their parents, and that we can create, with every generation, a more loving, a more healthy environment for our children and for our future. Thank you so much for your unending love. And God, thank you so much even for the difficult times. Those are the times when it's most difficult to say thank you. But I pray that when we recognize that we're in the challenge, that we can make a conscious effort to thank you. Thank you for your embracing love, and thank you for your tough love. I offer this prayer in my name, Mike Landonia Hendrick, blessed your family. Amen and adieu. Thank you.